So hello students, in this video I want to discuss with toxicity studies. So what is meant by toxicity studies? Why you have to do toxicity studies? Okay, toxicity studies are performed in order to identify or characterized adverse effects or a toxicity of the compounds by performing the um, studies on animals are either in the in vitro methods. Okay, so toxic studies are going to be performed in order to identify the toxicity of the drug, toxicity of the new chemical entity, uh, by performing the toxic studies on either in the animals, okay, or in the in vitro methods, either in vivo methods by using of the living animals such as rodents and non-rodents, or either you can go for in vitro methods. Okay, in order to, why you have to conduct toxic studies? In order to determine the toxicity of the drug and nature of the toxicity. Okay, so that with this toxic study you can assess the safety of the drug. Okay, mainly toxic studies are performed to assess the safety. Okay, so this toxicity data of new chemical entity, toxicity study of the new chemical entity is a vital, okay, it is a very much important for regulatory authorities, okay, to approve the clinical trials, okay, to approve the clinical trials for this new chemical entity. Okay, so suppose if the drug is more toxicity, okay, the drug is not passed in the clinical in the phase of preclinical toxicity studies, the new chemical entity, it cannot enter into clinical trials. Okay, so majorly toxins are going to be performed in order to assess the safety of the new chemical entity. Okay, so once again I will repeat you, toxicities are going to be toxic studies are performed to determine the toxicity of the new chemical entity. Okay, new chemical entity by performing toxic studies on either in vitro method, or either in vivo methods. Okay, whatever the data of the toxic studies, preclinical toxic studies, are very much essential for regulating authorities to approve the new chemical entity to go to the clinical trials. Okay, so for that you need toxic studies. This is nothing but preclinical toxicity studies. Okay, so right, so every drug, why you have to test the toxic studies? Every drug, okay, is not every drug it have some toxicity. Okay, so in order to assess the benefit risk ratio, okay, you can use toxic studies. If the benefits is less, toxicity is more, so there is no chances for passing the drug, okay, for clinical in preclinical toxic studies. Okay, so why you have to conduct the toxicity studies? So in order to assess the benefit risk ratio, and you have to protect the therapeutic index of the new chemical entity. Therapeutic index is mainly assess the safety of the drug. It is it is calculated by maximum tolerated dose by minimum curative dose. Okay, is nothing but LD50 by ED50. Okay, next is the smaller the ratio, better the safety. Okay, so this is about the main motto of the toxic studies. Okay, so whenever you go for the toxicology studies, definitely in the animals, okay, the whatever the study you are planning, the study should be approved by institutional ethical committee, IAEC, Institute Animal Ethics Committee. So once the protocol is approved, okay, in institution ethical committee, then only you are going to be execute the project. Okay, so this is about definition of toxic studies. So various regulating authorities, okay, various regulating authorities will regulating authorities uh, are asking for toxicity studies. So in overall worldwide, so you can say that uh, OECD, okay, OECD, and in India Schedule Y, okay, so it will give some side guidelines, okay, ICH guidelines, okay, ICH guidelines, OECD guidelines, and Schedule Y. They given some guidelines. Based upon the guidelines only you can going to be perform the toxicity studies. Okay, so toxicity studies, okay, toxicity studies two types. One is in vitro toxicity studies, second one is in vivo toxicity studies. So here we are going to be discuss about in vivo toxicity studies. Okay, so different type of toxicity studies are there. Okay, different type of toxicity studies. Okay, single dose toxic studies, they are called as acute toxic studies. Okay, repeated dose toxicities, okay, repeated dose, okay, single dose toxicity, they are called as acute toxicity. Repeated dose toxicity is called as subacute and subchronic toxicity and chronic toxicity. Okay, repeated dose toxicity again, they are classified into subacute, subchronic and chronic toxicity. Next, local irritation toxicity, allergic toxicology studies, genotoxicity, carcinogenicity, mutagenicity, okay, teratogenicity. So these are so many toxicities are there. Okay, so any chemical, any drug molecule or any new chemical entity which have the not only have the good therapeutic activity, and also have the very minimal or very less toxicity, okay, then only it's going to be enter into the clinical trials. Later on, after completion, it is enter into the market. Okay, so that's why toxicities are very key role in approving the drug at every step. Okay, once it is when it's reached when is clinical trials, again in clinical trials also you have to prove that, okay, our drug is efficacy and as well as the efficacy and as well as the more safety. Okay, right. So here in your syllabus, they mentioned three toxic studies. One is acute, second one is subacute, third one is chronic. Okay, so acute toxicity is the single oral toxicity studies, okay, single dose toxicity studies. Okay, second, okay, subacute and chronic toxicities are repeated dose toxicity studies. You are going to be administered the drug for multiple times. Okay, multiple times. Okay, acute, subacute and chronic. Okay, so duration of the toxic studies. Okay, so acute toxicity uh, uh, duration is 14 days. Subacute toxicity, it is 28 days. Subchronic toxicity is 90 days. Chronic toxicity is in between 6 to 1 year or more than 1 year. Okay, so this is the duration of toxic studies. Duration of this duration of the toxic studies, you have to study the toxicity of the drug. Okay, with this duration. Okay, acute toxicity for 14 days, subacute 20 days, 28 days, subchronic 90 days, chronic 6 months to 1 year. Okay, even more than that also. So first toxicity studies is acute toxicities. Okay, so whatever it may be toxic studies, that may be acute, subacute and chronic. So first you have to keep in mind So one is principle. So next one is a procedure. Third one, last one is report. Last one is report. Okay, so first what is the principle involved in the acute toxic studies? Okay, in acute toxic studies, the principle main principle involved is you have to administer the single predetermined doses. Okay, predetermined doses of the your drug. Okay, predetermined doses of your drug administered single time. Okay, single time to a group of animals. Okay, maybe rodents and non-rodents. Okay, later on, okay, you have to administer drug for single time a group of animals. So later on you have to observe the any sign of toxicities, any sign of toxicities, especially mortality. Okay, for the period of 14 days. This is about the principle involved in acute toxic studies. So what is the principle? So the principle involved in acute toxicity is uh, the drug with the predetermined dose you have to administer. Okay, with single dose into a group of animals. So group of animals, later on you observe the animals for a sign of any toxicity. You have to observe the animals for the sign of toxicity for the period of 14 days. Okay, 14 days. Okay, so this is about principle. Okay, so what is the use of acute toxic studies? So main acute toxicity use is to determine LD50. Okay, lethal dose. Okay, mainly useful to determine lethal dose. Okay, LD50. What is LD50? Okay, LD50 is nothing but how much dose of drug required to kill 50% of the animal is called as LD50. Okay, so not only you can determine LD50, and also you determine maximum non-lethal dose. Okay, maximum non-lethal dose means at the maximum dose where you could not produce any lethality. Okay, maximum non-lethal dose. Next, maximum tolerated dose. Okay, maximum tolerance means the dose tolerated by the animals without produce significant damage. That is nothing but maximum tolerated dose. Okay, minimum lethal dose, MLD, minimum lethal dose. It is the dose. Okay, it is the dose where you can find the lethality in the animal. Okay, so these are the three things you can identify from the acute toxic studies. Acute toxic mainly you can determine the LD50 of the animal. Okay, next MTD, MLT, and also what is the type of toxicity you can also determine in the acute toxicity. What is the type of toxicity? Maybe it is kidney toxicity, maybe either liver toxicity. Okay, maybe. Okay, type of toxicity, sometimes nature of the toxicity you can determine from acute toxicity. Okay, so along with, so this acute toxicity is going to be useful to determine the which dose are going to be uh, you have to select it for subacute, subchronic and chronic toxicity. Okay, so it gives an idea about what is the suitable dose level for subacute, acute toxicity. So this is the information you can drawn from acute toxicity studies. Okay, acute toxicity studies. Okay, so already you know that how to determine the LD50 already in the lab. already I told two methods, Carbar method and as well as the graphical method. So please all of you go through that two methods. So how you are going to be do, so how graphical method, arithmetic method are useful to calculation of LD50 determination. First you have to determine the uh, 3 dose level. Okay, so 1 dose level produce 100% mortality, low dose level produce 0% mortality. So third one is in between these two. Okay, in between, so you have to determine, sorry, you have to determine the 5 dose levels. Okay, first 1 dose is 100% mortality, 1 dose is zero mortality. In between you have to, okay, determine, you have to select 3 doses. Ultimately you have to identify 5 dose level, 5 dose drug. Okay, 5 dose level. So that drug, that each dose you have to administer to group of 10 animals, a group of 10 animals. Okay, for example 100 mg is the 100 mg is the dose which is going to be produce 100% mortality. 10 mg is the least drug produce zero mortality. In between, okay, 10 to 100 mg you can select 3 more doses. Okay, so for each dose level you have to take 10 animals. Okay, so you have to administer single time, then you have to observe the getting of mortality only, how many animals are going to be die. Okay, in each dose level you note down the, okay, you note down the mortality, and you 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 do the graph between the, okay, log dose versus percentage death. You convert the already you know 10 animals are there. Okay, suppose if 2 animals are dead, you can convert the death into percentage. Okay, percentage death. Okay, by this log dose versus percentage death. Okay, log dose versus percentage death. So if you graph the, you float the graph, you know the, okay, LD50. It is observed in graphical method. In arithmetic method, Carbar method, same. Okay, instead of log dose you can sorry, uh, uh, instead of percentage death you can convert that death into probit values. Okay, probit value in the same also you can draw. Okay, but these two methods are some disadvantages. What are the disadvantages is, so you need so many animals. Okay, in order to avoid this, so OECD recommends some toxic uh, guidelines for testing of acute toxicity. Example, fixed dose procedure, uh, next acute toxic category method, and up and down methods. Okay, so here, mm, so this is OECD. Okay, OECD, what is stands for OECD? Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Okay, okay, OECD means Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Okay, so these are the different OECD guidelines are available to test the, okay, acute toxicity studies. One is fixed dose procedure 420, acute toxic classic method 423, up and down procedure. Okay, so already I shared the OECD guidelines, okay, for acute toxicity, subacute and chronic toxicity in our group. Please and also go through that PDF documents. Okay, if you want you can collect the informations. Okay, so these are the now, so what you had completed, so how to determine the LD50 by OECD guidelines. Okay, so these are the guidelines, OECD guidelines available to determine the acute toxic studies. Okay, fixed dose procedure 420, acute toxic classical method 423, up and down procedure 425. Okay, in examination you write down the acute toxic studies are going to be performed by according to the OECD guidelines. Okay, you can below you can write, okay, fixed dose procedure, acute toxicity classical method, and up and down procedure. Okay, next is 28 days. Okay, 28 days and 90 days. Okay, 28 days subacute, 90 days is chronic. Okay, so repeated dose 28 toxic studies you have to perform by 407. Okay, repeated dose 90 days toxic studies you can perform by 408. So please remember these two only. Okay, don't go for others. Okay, right? So next is chronic. Okay, so chronic dose toxic studies. So I will tell you chronic dose toxicity studies. So this is about the some guidelines. Okay, for acute and subacute and subchronic. Okay. Next, now you are going you are on the discussion.